Together, they led the San Francisco 49ers to 5 Super Bowl titles, combined for 4 MVPs, and created a legacy that reshaped the NFL forever. But their relationship was pretty complicated, because what started as a mentor-student bond slowly turned into a fierce rivalry.
There's a quarterback controversy developing. We're going to have to select between Steve Young and Joe Montana.
This is the story of Joe Montana and Steve Young, and how their complicated relationship
I want to play desperately, and I'm going to try to drive everyone nuts till they give me a shot.
forged a dynasty unlike any other. Back in the late 1970s, the 49ers were a mess. The franchise had posted back-to-back 2-14 seasons, and the future looked rough. But then came Bill Walsh, an offensive mastermind with a brand new vision for football. Short passes, timing routes, and precision over power. The NFL didn't know it yet, but the West Coast offense was about to change everything. And to run it, Walsh needed the right mind. Enter Joe Montana, a third-round pick in 1979 out of Notre Dame. Montana wasn't the most athletic, he didn't have the biggest arm, and he even didn't talk trash. He just won. A lot. By 1981, just 2 years into his career, he was the starter. And by January, he was already a household name. In the NFC Championship game, the 49ers found themselves down 6 in the final moments of the game. Montana took the snap, rolled right, pump faked, and then Dwight Clark, touchdown, ball game. A play that would go down in history as the catch. The play that would start a dynasty. Because after that, they went on to win Super Bowl 16, giving the Niners their first title in franchise history. However, everything kind of fell apart in 1982 due to a player strike.
The strike is on. The National Football League has called a strike that will begin tomorrow.
In 9 games, the 49ers went just 3-6, and all of a sudden, the whispers started. Was Montana's 1981 season just a fluke? In 1983, Montana was out to prove the doubters wrong. He led the 49ers to a 10-6 record, threw for 3,900 yards, and the team cruised all the way to the NFC Championship, where one team stood between them and a Super Bowl appearance: Washington.
Many people, John, don't give the 49ers a chance against the Redskins. How do you feel about it?
I don't know that they have much of a chance either.
It looked like all hope was lost when they fell behind 21-0. But Montana wasn't ready to give up that easily. He led one of the wildest comebacks of his career, firing touchdown after touchdown and bringing the 49ers all the way back to tie the game 21-21 in the fourth quarter. It was set up to be another Montana miracle. Then the flags started flying. Back-to-back pass interference calls.
Flag is down. Penalty marker down.
I don't know, that's awfully close to be calling that a hole.
Both of them controversial, and both of them crushing. The refs handed Washington just enough yards to get into field goal range, where Chip Lohmiller stepped up, nailed it, and ended the 49ers season right there. But that didn't faze Montana. In fact, it made him even stronger. Because a year later, the 49ers went 15-1 in the regular season. The 49ers were scary good. They won games by an average of 15 points. They scored 475 points, the second most in the NFL that year. And they gave up just 227 points, the fewest in the league. Montana was in total command, throwing for 28 touchdowns, 3,630 passing yards, and a 102.9 passer rating. Montana wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but he was always the smartest guy on the field. And when the pressure hit, he was different. They called him Joe Cool because he made fourth-quarter comebacks look so easy. In the playoffs, the 49ers kept rolling. They crushed the Giants 21-10 in the divisional round. Then they shut down the Bears 23-0 in the NFC Championship. Then came Super Bowl 19, Joe Montana versus Dan Marino. Marino had just set the NFL on fire with 5,084 passing yards and 48 touchdowns, both records at the time. So this should have been a legendary battle, but Montana had other plans. He ripped Miami apart, throwing for 331 yards, 3 total touchdowns, and leading the 49ers to a 38-16 victory. With Hall of Famers like Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, and Fred Dean by his side, Montana was leading the charge of a dynasty in progress. But in 1985, something weird happened. The 49ers made the playoffs, only to be rocked by the Giants 17-3. Then things got worse in 1986, because in the very first game of the season, Montana dropped back to pass against the Bucs, and suddenly he got hit. Doctors diagnosed him with a ruptured disc, a herniated disc in his lower back. Montana needed surgery, and it wasn't a quick cleanup either. It was a 2-hour operation. Doctors said he would be crazy to ever play football again, but this was Joe Montana we're talking about. So, just 55 days later, against all odds, he was back. And he led the 49ers back to the playoffs, where they once again got matched up against the Giants. This was their chance at revenge. But instead, it was a disaster. The Niners got steamrolled 49-3. But even worse than that was what happened to Montana. The hit was so brutal, it knocked Montana out cold and forced him to get another back surgery. But Montana was a tough guy and he'd be back. So there was no QB controversy. Well, at least not yet. But in the background, a new story was brewing. 1,700 miles away in Tampa Bay, a young quarterback named Steve Young was fighting for survival. He had been a star at BYU, but in the NFL, things hadn't gone exactly according to plan. In 2 rough seasons with the Buccaneers, he posted a 3-16 record, threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and spent most of his time running for his life. The talent was obvious. However, the results weren't. But Bill Walsh saw something familiar. So, in the spring of 1987, he made a move that shocked the football world.
Young was traded to the San Francisco 49ers for a 1987 second and fourth round pick.
Steve Young wasn't a threat, at least not on paper. Joe Montana was still Joe Montana, the man with 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, and the face of a dynasty. The 49ers front office called it insurance. Head coach Bill Walsh stated, "Steve Young would be my contingency plan in the event that Joe faltered. That was my job, planning for fair and foul weather." And to the media, it made sense. Montana had already undergone 2 back surgeries, so bringing in Young felt like a smart move. Except quarterbacks don't get traded for second-round picks, unless there's a big reason. And Joe Montana knew that, because Steve Young wasn't just some journeyman looking for a fresh start. He was younger, faster, and the last thing he wanted was to be a backup for the rest of his career. By 1987, Joe Montana wasn't just playing football anymore. He was fighting off the future. Steve Young was in the building now, and Montana knew the clock was ticking. That season started with chaos. A players' strike hit in Week 3, and while most stars sat out, Montana chose to play, mostly with replacement players and backups. It was risky, but Montana showed why he was still Joe Cool. He led the NFL with 31 touchdown passes, 102.1 passer rating, and a 66.8% completion rate. Meanwhile, Jerry Rice had the greatest season of his life, scoring 22 touchdowns in just 12 games.
If Joe was a female, I would date him. Big time. Because we had such great chemistry.
The 49ers went 13-2, finished first in points scored and first in total yards, and looked like a Super Bowl lock. But then came the playoffs, and the 49ers got stunned by the Vikings in the divisional round. Montana even got benched halfway through the game, and Steve Young came in, and he played well, really well. And just like that, the whispers turned into headlines. Was this still Montana's team, or was it time to hand the keys to Young?
If Bill Walsh were to say to you, "Joe, it's time to hang it up," would you play somewhere else?
Yes.
In 1988, that awkward energy carried into the season. Head coach Bill Walsh kept rotating the quarterbacks, sometimes drive to drive, sometimes game to game. Montana would start one week, Young the next. It's been awkward. It's always been awkward, and I think it'll always be awkward, because we both wanted to be super successful, and there's only one job. Players didn't know who the leader was supposed to be. The media kept asking the same question over and over. Is this a quarterback controversy?
Just as there will always be fleas on dogs, there will be a quarterback controversy somewhere in the NFL. And now there is one building here in San Francisco.
By midseason, the 49ers were 6-5, and it seemed like Montana's time as a starter was nearing its end.
It's very likely that Steve will start again.
But then, Joe Cool turned the season around, the only way he knew how, by winning. On Monday Night Football, in front of the whole country, he led the 49ers to a win over the defending champion Washington. That victory lit a fire. San Francisco won 4 of their last 5 games, finished 10-6, and clawed their way into the playoffs. When they got there, they crushed the Vikings 34-9, getting revenge for the playoff disaster the year before. Then they went to Chicago, faced the Bears in 26 below zero wind chills, and still dominated, winning 28-3. Finally, it was time for the Super Bowl, their first since 1984. Down 16-13 with just over 3 minutes left, Montana jogged onto the field. This was his moment. He led a 92-yard march down the field.
On first down, Montana to Rice again.
Capped off with a game-winning touchdown to John Taylor.
Touchdown, John Taylor!
49ers were back on top of the football world. But even in victory, the Montana-Young tension didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Because after the confetti settled and the champagne dried, the team got hit with another shock. Coach Bill Walsh retired. Nobody knew how the new head coach, George Seifert, would handle the 2 QB situation. Turns out, it didn't matter that season. Montana came back in 1989 and had the best year of his career. Maybe the best season any quarterback had ever played to that point. 70.2 completion rate, an NFL record at the time, 26 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions, and a 112.4 passer rating, the highest in NFL history back then. The 49ers went 14-2, with their only 2 losses coming by a combined 5 points. In the playoffs, they went into full dynasty mode, outscoring opponents 126-26 over 3 games. Montana threw for 800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in the postseason, and posted a mind-blowing 146.4 passing rating. And in Super Bowl 24, the 49ers destroyed the Denver Broncos 55-10, the biggest blowout in Super Bowl history. By the end of the 80s, the Niners had won 4 Super Bowls in the decade, becoming the second team in NFL history to reach that mark, after the Steelers. A year later, Montana and the 49ers were back at it again. They started 10-0, crushing teams left and right. Against Atlanta, Montana threw 6 touchdowns, with Jerry Rice catching 5 of them.
5 touchdown receptions, Montana throwing for 6. What can we say? They are simply unbelievable.
Now, they were chasing something no team had ever done, a three-peat. And then they found themselves 1 game away from making the Super Bowl, the NFC Championship against the New York Giants. The game was a slugfest. The Niners led 13-12 with just over 2 minutes left. And best of all, they had the ball. All they had to do was run out the clock. But then, disaster. Running back Roger Craig fumbled, but the Niners were still the Niners. They had the rings, the dominance, and the legacy. But it seemed like no matter how much Montana accomplished, the question always loomed: when would Steve Young take over? And what were just whispers in the background were about to reach a fever pitch. Because in 1991, the 49ers were still Joe Montana's team. At least, that's what everyone thought. Even at 35 years old, he was still playing some of the best football of his life. But in training camp, Joe suffered a torn tendon in his right elbow, ending his season before it even began. And just like that, the door Steve Young had been waiting for swung wide open. This was his shot. However, the season started with a tough reality check. A narrow loss to the Giants on the road ended the Niners' historic run of 18 straight regular season road wins, a record that still stands. Steve Young showed flashes of brilliance, even leading the league in passer rating with an impressive 101.8. But he also faced a setback himself, a knee injury in Week 10 that sidelined him for 5 games. With Young out, backup Steve Bono took over, guiding the team to a solid stretch of wins. But despite finishing 10-6, the 49ers missed the playoffs for the first time in years. This felt like a team on the verge of greatness, but also a team in transition. Would Joe Montana return? Would Steve Young rise to the occasion? Could the 49ers reclaim their throne? Heading into 1992, Joe Montana was finally healthy again, and he expected to get his job back, the job he'd rightfully earned by winning 4 Super Bowls and rewriting the definition of clutch. But the Niners had other plans. George Seifert had made his decision. Young was the future, and that future started now. Montana couldn't believe it. Why wasn't I allowed to compete for the job? I just had one of the best years I'd ever had. I could understand if I wasn't playing well. We had just won 2 Super Bowls, and I had one of my best years, and we were winning in the championship game when I got hurt. How do I not get an opportunity? The locker room was tense. The fans were divided, and every time Young made a mistake, Candlestick Park erupted in chants of, "We want Joe." But the thing was, he lit up the league, winning NFL MVP and leading the 49ers to a 14-2 record. He threw 25 touchdowns, ran for 4 more, and finished with a great 107.0 passer rating. But for that, all that success didn't equal peace. He knew exactly what the fans were thinking. That's great. Can you win the Super Bowl? Can you do what Joe did? Every Young highlight was met with comparisons to Montana. Every slip-up was magnified under the weight of expectations. The playoffs started strong. The 49ers survived a mud-soaked slugfest against Washington in the divisional round. Then, Young was just 1 win away from playing in his first Super Bowl. However, in the NFC Championship against the Cowboys, the Niners turned the ball over 4 times and fell short, 30-20. But after years of tension, that offseason the 49ers finally made the decision that had been hanging over the franchise for half a decade. They traded Joe Montana.
I was honored and I was shocked, that, to say the least. I think I had a couple quick beers.
Fans were furious.
It was awful that he wasn't going to be able to go to the Hall of Fame in number 16 as a 49er. Of course, the fans were just numb from the shock.
Stadiums echoed with chants of "We want Montana." No one could believe that the 49ers were turning their back on a proven winner for a player still trying to prove himself as a true franchise quarterback. Reporters constantly asked Young about Montana, sometimes directly, other times just by comparison.
The burden on your shoulders here is as great as it can be on any player in any sport, really, because of Joe Montana.
Every throw, every decision by Young was scrutinized through the lens of Joe's legacy. Young had to carry the impossible burden of not just winning games, but also winning over a fan base still mourning the loss of their hero. Young knew he had to perform, and that's exactly what he did. The 49ers lit up the scoreboard, finishing first in points scored, first in total yards, and boasting the league's best passing attack. Steve Young led the NFL in touchdown passes and passer rating with a 101.5, while Jerry Rice led the league in receiving yards with 1,503. The 49ers made it to the NFC Championship game again, where they once again faced the Dallas Cowboys.
I don't think in all my years I've ever seen that.
San Fran kept it close, but a second quarter avalanche from the Cowboys buried them before halftime. The final score was 38-21. Cowboys win. Fans and media asked again, would the outcome have been different if Joe was still here? Meanwhile, in Kansas City, Montana led the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game, their deepest playoff run since the AFL days. That only made the comparisons louder. And after back-to-back playoff failures, the pressure on San Francisco was about to boil over. Owner Eddie DeBartolo and team president Carmen Policy knew it. So did George Seifert. That's why the 49ers loaded up in 1994. They went all in on veterans like Ken Norton Jr., who had just won 2 Super Bowls with Dallas. They brought in Ricky Jackson, Gary Plummer, and Deion Sanders, who had one of the greatest single seasons ever by a cornerback, winning Defensive Player of the Year. But after a red-hot Week 1, the Niners lost to none other than Joe Montana and the Chiefs in Week 2. Then came a 40-8 disaster against the Eagles in Week 5, where Young got benched mid-game and exploded on the sideline. That meltdown changed everything. From there, the Niners turned into a machine. They rattled off 10 straight wins, steamrolling teams by almost 20 points a game. They dropped 505 points in the regular season, still a franchise record. And Young posted a then-record 112.8 passer rating, earning his second MVP. But the real test came in the NFC Championship. The game was the Cowboys versus the 49ers, round 3.
The winner of this game goes to the Super Bowl.
Steve Young later wrote in his autobiography that he knew he needed to win, and anything less is failure. That's the Joe Montana effect. He won 4 Super Bowls before I replaced him, and that's what I'm up against. On the third play of the game, Eric Davis picked off Troy Aikman and took it back for a touchdown. The Cowboys fumbled their next 2 possessions, and suddenly it was 21-0 San Francisco before Dallas could even blink. Steve Young threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for another. He finished with almost the exact same passer rating as he had in the 1992 loss to Dallas. Only this time, the Niners won, 38-28. 2 weeks later, the 49ers crushed the San Diego Chargers in the Super Bowl, 49-26. Steve Young threw 6 touchdown passes, breaking none other than Joe Montana's Super Bowl record. Young walked to the sideline, a Super Bowl champ, yelling,
"Someone take the monkey off my back, please!"
Basically saying, I'm done living in Joe Montana's shadow, that he was now the face of the franchise. A year later, the Niners finished 11-5, winning the NFC West for the 4th straight year. And in the divisional round, the 49ers were nearly 10-point favorites at home against the Packers, but the Packers came out swinging. A Craig Newsome fumbled return put Green Bay up early, and Favre added 2 first-half touchdown passes. Despite Young outgaining Favre in yards, the Niners' 4 turnovers doomed them, and they lost 27-17. Heading into 1996, the front office even brought Bill Walsh back, not as a head coach, but as an administrative assistant, basically to hover over offensive coordinator Mark Trestman and try and fix the play calling. Steve Young still led the NFL in passer rating, but he took an absolute beating in 1996. He suffered a groin injury, a concussion, and broken ribs by season's end. At one point, third-string QB Jeff Brome even had to start a game, but once again, the Niners were in the playoffs.
The big thing to me is Steve Young. Steve Young is not only the best quarterback on this team, but he's the best running back on this team. And
in the wild card round, San Francisco shut out the Eagles 14-0. It was a wet, windy game, but Young managed to gut it out, even while playing with broken ribs. He threw 1 touchdown, ran for another, and led the Niners to victory. Then they had to face the Packers again. Young tried to play through his rib injury, but had to leave early. And because of that, the game spiraled out of control, and Brett Favre and the Packers won 35-14. And then the next season started with disaster. Superstar receiver Jerry Rice went down with a devastating knee injury. His season was basically over. Steve Young had another concussion, and at one point, he seriously considered retirement. But after those early injuries, the team rallied. Steve Young came back, and so did the wins. The 49ers ripped off another 10-game win streak. In the playoffs, the Niners beat Minnesota easily in the divisional round 38-22, with Steve Young throwing 3 touchdowns. But in the NFC Championship, it was time for the true inevitable test: Brett Favre and the Packers. And Favre turned out to be San Francisco's kryptonite, beating them in the playoffs for the 3rd straight year. But in 1998, they had one last shot. The Niners finished the season 12-4. Then came the playoff rematch with Green Bay, a game that would take a miracle to win. The thing was, that miracle happened. That moment became known as the Catch-2.
Pass is caught by Owens. Owens made the catch.
Unfortunately, that joy didn't last long, because in the divisional round, they fell short to the Falcons.
And this one may be picked off.
And things got even worse the next season, when Steve Young suffered a brutal concussion in Week 3 against Arizona. That was his 7th that was officially diagnosed, though the real number was probably higher. It was the end of Young's career, and the end of a dynasty, the end of a football empire. For nearly 2 decades, the San Francisco 49ers defined greatness. From 5 Super Bowl titles to multiple league MVPs, including 2 from Joe Montana in the regular season, and 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and 2 regular season MVPs for Steve Young's, in addition to his Super Bowl MVP, they set the gold standard in the NFL. And at the heart of it all was a quiet rivalry between 2 quarterbacks. On paper, they were just teammates. In reality, they were 2 superstars trapped in the same quarterback room, knowing only one could sit on the throne. And that tension, that beef, it's what made the 49ers a dynasty in the first place. We're friends, Steve and I, but on the practice field, if he doesn't hate me as much as I hate him, then there's something wrong. That tension, it didn't tear the 49ers apart, it elevated them. Montana wanted to prove he wasn't done. Young wanted to prove he was the future. And in trying to outdo each other, they kept pushing the 49ers to heights the NFL had never seen. It wasn't always pretty, it wasn't always friendly, but it was one of the greatest and most legendary dynasties in all of sports history. If you enjoyed this video, stick with Blitz, subscribe, and check out some of our other content right here.